First observation, I'm very honest. All the outside people you ever bring in, you know you're taking a risk because we're horribly honest people, or at least we feel we can be. So my name's Todd Dewett. I'm very happy to be here for lots of reasons. One is that my current career as a professional speaker and writer usually puts me on stage in front of many, many people. So a small group is several hundred, a big group is several thousand. And I love that job. And it's only probably 1 out of 20 gigs, something like that, where I get a small group and I get to speak to more people and I get to watch their reactions, for better or for worse, when I'm up here talking, and get to know more of their story, and I love that. I love that a lot because that's kind of where I started. So thanks for having me here. I appreciate it. I used to be a consultant. I know that means good things and bad things to different people. Used to be a consultant for Ernst & Young and Anderson, which then became Accenture, the world's largest consulting firm. And I hated it, and here's why. I hated it because at the age of 27, 28, I figured out that most people going to the cube around the country at their offices, sitting in their cubes, didn't like what they were doing. They were not feeling purpose, they weren't feeling engaged. They were, and I mean this, they were tolerating, enduring their job, and that was it. And I found that very depressing as a 20-something who wanted to have a career worth looking back on many years later. And so I did something that upset a whole lot of people, and I quit a high-paying job, a prestigious job at Ernst & Young, and I went to Texas A&M, and I got a PhD in management from the business school, and I love that place. This is Michigan, so you guys have no beef with A&M, just Ohio, is that right? just checking.
I don't think there's anyone we like.
Now I know. Thanks,
We don't
Chris.
even like each other. Michigan State and U of M is a great divide.
Yeah, one of my best friends is a prof over at Michigan State. So anyhow, I've heard this story. Love Aggie Land, love that place. And after I got out of there and earned a doctoral degree, I became a professor, and I love that job. I ended up going to a school in Ohio, called Wright State University. Have you heard of Wright State? Anybody? A couple people have heard of it. It's a neat place. It was a branch campus of Ohio State and Miami University in 1967, and now they have over 20,000 students, and they're a Carnegie II institution with all kinds of degrees. It's a neat place. I taught business students at the graduate level for an MBA program for 10 years, and was the dean over the MBA and executive programs. So when I look at people in the trenches, I've been there. I understand what you're talking about. When I look at administrators, I've been there. I know the pain that you're feeling trying to herd sheep sometimes, or herd cats is probably the better way to say it. It's tough. So then I got lucky, got very, very lucky. And being a professor is what I thought I would do, writing papers and teaching, until I was done working. And I couldn't believe that they paid me. I'm not kidding. Now I know some days you guys want to gripe about your job or your colleagues. Okay, don't agree or disagree out loud. I know that some days that's what normal people do. I also know that you have an opportunity, like I did as a professor and like I do now as a writer and a speaker, to feel, let's call it, above average purpose. Most people don't have it. I'm going to encourage you strongly in the next few minutes to find a way to grab onto that glass half full, not because it's just a trick in your mind, but because you deserve to have it. You, as people in this organization, deserve to have it. You actually have an interesting history and a purpose in a community that you can help. And that is an easier purpose to define and grasp and see that you're a part of than a person that works at the post office, a person that works in a manufacturing facility where they make a tiny widget but they have no idea how it becomes something a consumer cares about later. You guys actually have an interesting opportunity that other people don't. So I hope that you'll never lose focus on that. So the topic that you brought me here for is interesting. It's among the secondary topics I address, which is diversity. I understand you've had a bunch of managers go through different cohort groups of training, and that conversation has led to different activities during employee groups, just like this. Well, I'm not a world-class guru in the world of diversity. It's a quality part of the leadership discussion that I have. What I do have is a couple stories and some interesting personal experiences that maybe will be useful for you. I think people get hung up on the wrong side of the diversity discussion. I know, you know, that people get hung up sometimes on the wrong side of the diversity discussion. I don't know how it got this way, but it's true. I like to joke, to be honest with you, and this is going on film, so you know I must believe what I'm saying. I believe, give or take, we've got about another 250 years max that we're going to continue to struggle, and that's what we're doing right now, struggling with this topic. Now, why would I say that? Before it goes away and it's less of a struggle. Why would I say that? What are you thinking, Aaron?
So a lot of combining of racial identities.
Thank you. Starting in the 60s, we started to realize how beautiful other races are and commingling in various ways. And now we have all kinds of people with beautiful tans walking around better than mine. And that's going to continue. There's people who study this trend. You must know this. There's people who study this for a living, demographers. And what they tell us is that in my lifetime, whether Todd likes it or not, white guys are going to be a clear minority. I wasn't referring to this, Todd. I was referring to me. White guys are going to be an interesting minority. Right now in the workforce, ladies, did you know this? There's more women than men. It's been that way for several years. Did you know that there's more females graduating college than men? Now, how long will that take before that floods up into the management ranks? Well, people speculate, but it's going to happen. It is going to happen. And thanks to the immigration issues and commingling issues, we're going to all be a beautiful little mocha in about 300-400 years. That might seem strange to some of you. I think it's inevitable and good. Man, if you want to work in corporate America in the next 50 years, you better find that an interesting proposition, because white males will be a minority, Latinos will be a majority, and women will be the super majority in the next 20. Do you realize what's happening in the next 20 in corporate America in terms of diversity and how things are going to change? Who's retiring in the next 20?
You guys.
1%.
I'm not working until I'm 70, sorry.
What's the generation of people who are about to retire?
Mine.
The boomers.
Yeah, the baby boomers.
And when they retire, are they a big group?
Yeah.
There's gazillions of them. I'm not going to be scientific. I'm intentionally going to be non-scientific today. There's gazillions of those folks. I call them the gray hairs. And I say that with kindness, because I've got a few as well. I've just shaved pretty close today. Those folks, when they retire, are going to create a vacuum. Listen carefully, I mean this, a vacuum of opportunity for everyone, especially folks who've been traditionally underrepresented, such as females and minorities, first thing that pops into most people's minds. A vacuum in the leadership ranks that's never been seen before in the history of our country. It used to be an idea that it's impossible for a 20-something to be a manager. It will be a necessity, not just for a 20-something, but for a 20-something female minority to fill all kinds of roles in the next 20 because of the simple numbers that are vacating roles. Most people haven't even heard what I'm telling you. They haven't thought about it. That's what's coming. So the need for people in different ways like me to talk about leadership in great teams is going to go through the roof, because overzealous young people are going to be dominating leadership teams in the next 20, 30 years. Isn't that exciting and scary? All right, let me back up and tell you my personal journey with diversity. As you can see, I'm a simple, pudgy, middle-aged white guy, right? I am, however, in a class that's a little different than a lot of people. I look a little different, and that's been good and bad in my career. I'll start by talking about tattoos. I already found a couple of you staring at my arm, so I'll go ahead and get that out of the way. I fell in love at the age of 18 with getting tats, and I'm still addicted, and I will be for the rest of my life. And show of hands, how many people in the room have at least one tat? Yay! Just two, my brothers and sisters. All right. Usually statistically there's more. Some people were censoring there. That's interesting. Don't worry. I'm not going to ask you to show it, but later today someone will. It's a fascinating topic. True story. I started doing this as a teen, and then in my professional life when it began, I realized quickly what stupid teenagers don't see, which is that there is a stigma attached to tattoos and other body modification practices, body art, call it what you want. It is very true that stigma has waned in recent years. Let's call it small instead of immense, but it is still there. Certain places at work, certain managers will negatively evaluate you. And I didn't know that. And I came home from a client engagement that was out of town. I worked for a consulting firm. I sat at my desk and I was so happy. True story. I thought I was about to be promoted. I had just come up with a big win at a client site that I was so thrilled about. I thought it was my first home run. I was about to get the promotion. I just knew this. Phone rings. It's my boss. And then I said, hello. He said, come to my office for a minute, would you? I said, sure. Walked down the hall. He said, shut the door. I said, okay. He said, sit down. I said, okay. And then I knew it. I'm up on a pedestal in my mind going, I'm about to be crowned the cool young guy. I'm getting promoted. And he said, what in the hell is on your arm? True story. I said, excuse me? He said, that thing over there, he's pointing to this arm. He said, what is it? Client saw it. He thought it looked like something a male body might have. He was trying to be polite. I said, what? And I pulled up my sleeve. He said, that. I said, that's a python. He said, that's not what the client thought. I was wearing a short sleeve shirt in a manufacturing environment, and the client could see the ink that I had. And he chastised me for being immature and not being socially aware enough. and told me I would never again show ink in front of those customers. I was 25 years old, and in response to his comment, I folded like a cheap suit and said, yes, sir. And I understood why I said it, even though it didn't feel good. You know what I mean? Fast forward 10 years later, I'm on the back end of a fun professor career. And I had become a speaker accidentally, which is now my full-time vocation. And I went to a gig one day. I'm wearing a sport jacket because I learned my lesson at 25 from that boss. I know corporate America is not ready for people that look funny. So I'm wearing a nice jacket. Why? Because I want to meet the expectations of good men and women in the audience. And I go do the gig. I meet people, tell stories. It went great. I was happy. After the gig, I was going to meet a friend for lunch who was coming through town, someone who had called me. Now, you know how you have friends at work who know you pretty well. But then you have friends that you knew back in high school who know all the ridiculous things that you did. Some of you, yeah, flashback, go ahead. One of those people called me, female, and I went to see her at this restaurant, and it was awesome. Sat down, we hugged first, we sat down, we talked about kids and family for all of about a minute, and she started giggling, and she looked right at me, and I said, what are you laughing at? And she said, that's a snazzy jacket you got there, Todd. And I knew what she was doing. She was making fun of me because I was well known to anyone who's ever known me to be a very, very casual person. I don't own a tie, let alone wear jackets. It's just not who I am. It's not good or bad. It just happens to be who I am. And I explained to her what happened when I was 25 in that office, how embarrassed I was. I explained to her how smart people are socially aware and they want to meet the needs of their audience, whether the audience is people in an office or people in a real audience like mine. You got to be socially aware. And she took that all in. And then she gathered herself and she said, well, maybe that was true and useful for you to think that when you were 25. But the world's changed a little bit. You've changed a lot. And you know what? I'll bet that if you'll take your jacket off, roll up your sleeves, and show your ink, they'll listen even better. And I thought that sounded a little haphazard to me. I wasn't sure she was correct. I said, really? She said, yeah. I said, why will that work? And she said something that kind of changed my life. She said, because people like real. And I started thinking that day about authenticity and how little of it we use every day in our professional lives in a way that I hadn't before. What I came to learn as a scholar is that authenticity, not just putting forth the polished image we think we're supposed to as a leader or a professional in a certain role, but going beyond just the positivity, the skills, the accolades, the positive stuff we all like to hang out there for people to see. Going beyond that and showing a little bit of the humanity, some of the learning moments and screw-ups, the more complete, raw, unfiltered you, is a magic elixir that makes the average follower or team member want to hear and care about the boss a little more. Why? Because when they do that, the boss isn't just a boss, but for the first time becomes a person. And yet what we do is feel pressure every day when we go to work to talk a certain way, to write a certain way, to dress a certain way, to make sure we fulfill this quote-unquote professional image. We've done that for so long with so much passion, we've forgotten to let our real selves out. So for me, authenticity, which I learned a lot about thanks to my addiction to tattoos. Authenticity, when I say show your ink, it's not about tattoos at all. It's just a hook I use, title of the next book I'm writing, to remind people what we've forgotten and that we need to hear, which is that people like to deal with other humans much more than they like to deal with people who just fill a role, people who are in a position, people who have a label. To be authentic sometimes can be risky. Long term, assuming that you're reasonable and you know how to censor yourself once in a while, it's far, far more fulfilling, the types of relationships authenticity will lead you towards, than people who go to work every day and passionately censor in the name of being professional.